my friends, my name is AJ and welcome back to my book nook. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different. So as you all know, I am Canadian. Don't know how you could have figured that out. As such, I think it's really important to be raising up Canadian creators, whether that be authors or YouTubers or actors or whatever that be. It's really great to see recently a lot more Canadian actors have been in bigger projects, such as some new Marvel shows or movies. But I really want to start seeing some Canadian authors being lifted up. I feel like I don't see that enough, and I want to do my part in that because I do love discovering Canadian authors. I do love kind of lifting them up. So that is what this new series is about. I'm calling it my Canadian Author Spotlight. Each video I'm going to be picking a Canadian author who's not very well known, and I will be choosing one of their books to cover and review and talk about, as well as just talking a little bit about the author themselves so that you can kind of get familiar with them and decide if you want to check out some of their work as well. So without further ado, let's dive into it, because today I am going to be talking about the author Natalie Jenner and her book, The Jane Austen Society. So Natalie Jenner is an English-born Canadian author. She currently lives in Oakville, Ontario, and she has released her first book, The Jane Austen Society, in 2020. Her second book, Bloomsbury Girls, is going to be released in 2022. If you want more information about her, you can check out her website. I'll link it down below, as well as all of her socials in the description as well. Now, as is common with all of my reviews, I'm going to try and keep it as spoiler-free as possible. However, there will be some of my spoiler-filled opinions a little bit later in the video, but I will leave timestamps down below for you so that you can check and skip to where you want to go if you don't want to watch spoilers and you haven't read the book yet. So let's talk about the Jane Austen Society. So the Jane Austen Society is a novel that takes place in the 1940s, and it basically follows this society of people who love Jane Austen and want to preserve her memory. It's very loosely based on a real society. However, I say loosely, I mean very loosely. Not much of it is common to the real society at all. It follows the story of several of the members of Mimi Harrison, a Hollywood starlet who is starting to lose the interest of audiences and producers as she grows older. Frances Knight, the agoraphobic descendant of the Austen family, who has to deal with the fact that her father is getting sicker and she will have to one day be an heir to the entire estate. Dr. Benjamin Gray, who is the doctor of the village of Chawton, where this takes place. Adeline Lewis, who is a young grieving war widow who is using Jane Austen's books to help her deal with her pain. Adam Berwick, a farmhand for the Knight estate, who was introduced to the books by a strange American tourist and has fallen in love with them ever since. Those are the main ones that we follow the stories of, but we do also have some of the other members, such as Andrew Forrester, who is the kind of lawyer for the Knight estate. Evie Stone, who is a former student of Adeline Lewis and now is a house girl at the Knight estate. And Yardley Sinclair, who runs the auction house. So this book is called The Jane Austen Society, but it's really less so about the society, it's less so about the books themselves that they're reading, and it's more so about these characters' lives. As I mentioned, this takes place post-World War II, so it's basically talking about everyone's life after the war, how things have changed. Everyone has their own kind of trauma. It's really them working through those traumas together by bonding over these books. I am going to give a slight trigger warning for this book. There is a scene with Mimi Harrison, the Hollywood star, who is a victim of an attempted sexual assault. There's also a scene where Adeline Lewis has a miscarriage, and there's a lot of her dealing with that. If either of those things are triggering to you, if that's not something that you're comfortable with, I would suggest maybe not picking this book up. However, if you're okay with, you know, just having the one scene where each of those things happen, and then it's more so about them dealing with the trauma of these things that have happened to them rather than these things happening themselves, then I think that is a really good book, and I think you should give it a chance. But if you're not comfortable with it, I totally understand. There are tons of other books that you can give a shot as well. So what are some of the things that I really liked about this book? Well, not only is it sort of about Jane Austen's books, but it's written very similarly to her novels. It was very, simple. It was very, kind of had that pastoral charm and language and romance to it. It was written a bit more simply than a lot of Jane Austen's books. Obviously, this was written, in the 2010s. It wasn't written back in Jane Austen's era. So obviously it is going to be more simple language. So that was great. It was just much easier to understand if that's something that you have trouble with, but you still love Jane Austen's work. As I said, this book is less about the books themselves, and it's more about the relationships between the characters, and the relationships between the characters are phenomenal. The writing is so great. All of the characters are so well written and so well rounded, and I really enjoyed getting to know them. I really enjoyed getting to see them interact with each other. I was fully invested in the romances and the friendships that were forming, and it was just really well written in that way. And as I said, I really liked that this book is not just about Jane Austen. I went into this book not really knowing what to expect. I got it for my birthday because I love Jane Austen. I did not know what to expect from it, but there isn't a lot about Jane Austen. There's a lot about dealing with grief and with life, and there's these different characters who are at different stages of their grief who are helping each other progress. And the society itself doesn't even begin until about halfway through the book, so that tells you how important the society is itself to the story. It reminded me a lot of the book series The Mother Daughter Book Club. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that. This was a book series that I read when I was probably in middle school, and it's this book series where it's this group of girls who are in this book club and they're reading classic novels, and it's actually what got me into classic novels in the first place. And it basically follows these girls, them doing this book club, and it's less so about the book club itself as it is about their lives. And they're using the stories from the books to help to rationalize the things that are happening in their life and to help to understand that. And it's about, growing up, and it's about using that literature to find bonds with other people and grow and heal. And I think that that is very similar to how this book works. It's not so much about Jane Austen, it's not so much about reading Jane Austen, but it is more about using those books to heal and to, understand how life works. Having said that, it is important that you are familiar with Jane Austen's work. There are quite a few references to it. They have some little debates interspersed between chapters where they discuss I think that this character is this way. Oh, I don't really care for that character, but this person really likes them. And so you do kind of have to know a bit about Jane Austen, but you don't have to know extensively. If you know the stories enough, then I think that it will be enough for you to understand the book and enjoy it. So what are some of the things that I didn't like about this book? Well, I wasn't a huge fan of how it started. Obviously, there are a lot of characters to introduce. This is an ensemble piece. It takes a while to introduce them all. The first few chapters are just introducing these different characters. So for me, it took a couple of chapters to really get into it because I was getting to know these characters for a few chapters, and it moves pretty slowly at the beginning. But once you really get into it, it moves at a fine pace. Speaking of pace, the other thing I didn't really like was the ending. The ending moved very quickly. Everything was happening in a very short amount of time. And on top of that, there's a lot of things left ambiguous at the end, which I'm fine with, and I actually like that. But then what ended up happening is that the author added an epilogue of it's a year later, here's what everyone's up to, here's what everyone's doing. I didn't enjoy that. I would have preferred that we left it at an ambiguous station. We know that the characters that we've been rooting for to get together are, together. We know that. And we assume that things are going okay. And I don't think we need to have that epilogue. I think it almost detracts from the ending a bit. But I still really enjoyed it. Alright, so that is it for my spoiler-free opinions. If you would like to hear some of my spoiler-filled opinions, then you can stick around. Otherwise, I have left a timestamp for you in the description below for you to skip to my final thoughts. Man, I wish I had a cup of tea. If you're here, then that means that you're here for my spoiler-filled opinions. If not, I hold no responsibility for what you're about to hear. So I really liked Adam's choice in this book. When they find out that Adam is the next heir for the Knight household and estate. And he wants to let the society to decide if he should come forward or not. And I really, really like that he didn't. Because I think that Adam's character, he's a very kind man, he's a very gentle man. And I like that he didn't come forward. I like that he didn't have to come out and say this terrible secret, and he's still processing the fact that his real father wasn't his real father. And I really like that he was allowed to have that, and he was allowed to deal with that and process that rather than forcing him to move forward. And I think that was really well done. I think it was a really good choice. When I first read it, I was a little bit upset. I was like, why? You could have so easy. Suddenly you own it. You don't have to pay anymore. But I think that it works better with him not having it, because I think that, like I said, the book is all about trauma and healing from that. And I think that in his way, he's still dealing with that. He just found out, and I don't think that that would allow him to heal in that way if he was thrust on the spot and has to tell everyone his big secret of who his father is. I really, really liked Dr. Gray. Dr. Gray was dreamy. I feel like with any talk about Jane Austen, we have to have a discussion about men written by women. I find that men in women-written books tend to be better. I don't know, you know, women just know what women want, and you get characters that are very respectful and very kind and always very caring. And I think that Dr. Gray is a perfect example of an Austen love interest. I think he works really, really well. I can definitely see the inspiration there, and I just absolutely love him. On the topic of written men, let's also talk about Jack Leonard. I absolutely hated that man. But that's a good thing, actually. I didn't hate him because he was poorly written. I hated him because he was well written. He's not a likable character. He's very manipulative, and that is a sign of good writing. If you can write a character where it makes sense for them to be doing the things they're doing, but also it infuriates the readers that that's happening, you did a good job. You did a really good job at introducing a character who is a very difficult person and is very hard to get along with. But you did it well, and that's props to you, Natalie Jenner, if you're watching this. It's very well written. All the characters are, and I just really, really enjoyed it. Welcome back to my non-spoiler people. So what are my final thoughts? Overall, I think that this was a really amazing book. You definitely have to know Jane Austen to understand this book. You don't have to know it extensively, but you should be familiar with her works enough that when they're talking about it and comparing it to their life, you're not confused. I think you also have to like that simple, romanticized lifestyle of living in a small village. If you're not into that, you're not going to enjoy this book. If you're not into kind of classic literature, kind of that pastoral charm, then you're not going to enjoy this either, because it is a very easy read, but it is a very heavy topic. It's very light reading, but also a heavy read, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of talk about grieving healthily. There's a lot of talk of all kinds of loss, of people kind of coming together over their trauma, and it's very heavy topics, but it's fairly light reading. I didn't find it that long, and like I said, it's not just about Jane Austen. It's about the people, and you don't have to be a huge fan of Jane Austen, like I said. You just have to be a fan of reading about people's lives, about them dealing with their grief, about them learning to live their life after this loss and in a post-World War II world. And it's just a really, really good. It reads a bit like a soap opera, like Downton Abbey, I'll be honest. But if that's something that you really like, I know I do, then I think that you'll really enjoy this book as well. Overall, I would give the Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner 4 members of the Jane Austen Society out of 5. And that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please let me know. Feel free to give it a thumbs up and tell me in the comments, have you read this book? Did this make you want to read it? Are you a big fan of Jane Austen? And if so, what is your favorite novel by her? I would love to have a conversation with you all down in the comments below. And if you want to see more stuff like this, feel free to hit that subscribe button and stick around. As for the Canadian Author Spotlight series, if you have any ideas for smaller authors, please let me know in the comments. I have a few more ideas for ones that I want to cover, but it can be difficult to find smaller authors when, you know, the bigger authors are the ones that are going to get publicized more. So please let me know if you find anything that you would like me to cover as well. And don't forget to check out Natalie Jenner's pages. I'll leave all of her information down in the description box below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see all of you lovely people in the next video. Bye!